Thank you, Madam Chair. The first question I have, thank you, Mr. Secretary, for being here today. Looking through the budget on page B50 for the Department of Correction, B51 on DMIS budget, it talks about cuts of around $3 million as a result of the Affordable Care Act, and then also budget lapses of around $15 million. Also further cuts of around $2 million that had to do with restructuring services. I was wondering if you can discuss that over a $20 million cut to the DMIS budget. If you can kind of talk a little bit more about that and some of the conversations maybe you had with the commissioner and people in that department that led you to believe those cuts were sustainable.
Well, first of all, I point you to the page before that shows that the entire estimated expenditures this year in DMIS are $505 million, and that we've recommended a budget of $517 million. So we've actually proposed increasing spending in the agency as a whole by $12 million, or more or less $11 million from between 18 and 19. We have made some, I'm sorry, I'm sorry, I looked at the wrong page, that's DDS. So no, you're absolutely right. It's level. We've proposed level funding them up about $1 million in DMIS on page B52. Forgive me for that. So we have made some reductions, but those are reductions off of a growing base. The changes that we've made in DMIS consist most significantly of rolling out the budgeted lapses. I mean, that's the $15.2 million, and those are savings that they are achieving this year based on, largely based on CBAC, so the reduced costs for salaries and other things for their employees make up most of that we negotiated. The other cuts, the $3 million cut, is related to, under the Affordable Care Act, we've been very much pushing for behavioral health providers to bill fee-for-service payments for the various services they provide to Medicaid clients, and they have increased their billings under our normal Medicaid program significantly and regularly over the last number of years, and we have periodically reduced we give them unrestricted, in the past we funded those programs just by giving grants to the organizations, and in return they provided services. Now that we are able to get those services covered under Medicaid, so that we are assured of the levels of service we're getting, and that we are sure to get federal reimbursement for those, we've been gradually reducing grants to reflect the increases in compensation they've been getting on fee-for-service. We are simply doing that here, reducing the grants by an amount that we think is more than offset by the increases in fee-for-service payments. The $2 million cut is for restructuring of some state-operated services. These are essentially conversions. We provide a number of state-operated services in DMIS. We obviously have a whole series of services at CVH and Whiting, the two hospitals. We also provide services at local mental health authorities, some of which are privately provided, some of which are state provided. This will allow them to convert a few, not a significant amount, but a few of the service areas which they think are well suited to being converted to private providers, and these will be the savings that result.
Thank you. And for my second question, under the Department of Transportation, it provides for 40 additional positions to the department under what it talks to be the general permit for the discharge of stormwater. If you could talk a little bit more about that and the DEP regulations that require those 40 positions, and if that's something that is a federal regulation, is that a state regulation that we imposed on ourselves, and what are the alternatives to that?
Yes. If you've been, I don't know your background, but if you've been involved in local government over the last decade, the issue of compliance with the statewide stormwater permit has been a hot and contested issue. As you know, we have gone, I think this is a federal rule change going back a number of decades that requires states to identify aggregate discharge levels that are permissible for stormwater, for surface collection of stormwater. So, and this is required in order to comply with those aggregate levels of discharge, which pollute our drinking water and fisheries, et cetera. We have had to undertake a whole series of steps, mostly around catch basins and stormwater equipment. The state government obviously has a big role to play. We operate a lot of roads and have lots of catch basins and storm drains. We have been slow to meet our requirements, which is perhaps a little bit to the chagrin of local officials who've been tasked with complying with this over the last number of years. We are now reaching a point at which our failure to comply could be result in fines or penalties to the state of Connecticut, and so we've allowed them, or we've requested that you provide some resources to them to begin to hire additional staff whose job will be to clean out and do the maintenance activities and retrofitting activities to our infrastructure, and also to do the significant amount of documentation that's required under the stormwater permit. So it requires inspecting and identifying the conditions and improvements that have been made at thousands of catch basins in various facilities around the state.
Thanks. Just a clarification, so it is something that is a federal requirement
Yes.
that we need to abide by, and it's also something, this isn't assisting municipalities, this is just taking care of the roads that are responsible by the state to take care of.
Correct, state roads.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Representative Reyes, followed by Representative O'Neill.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Secretary Barnes, thank you for being here with us. And just a couple